77 high temperature, and I should note yesterday we're not expecting
I struggle every day to keep myself balanced.
If I'm feeling this way, I can't be the only one.
Is my life really worth living? Like, is it
don't
really
think it ever occurred to me that I would be dealing with this
like,
for the
do I
rest of my
have to
life.
continue living?
That someone could be suffering right in front of your face, and you may never know it.
Hello, I'm Monica Gale. This past year, the Fox 2 family lost someone we loved to suicide. Meteorologist Jessica Starr took her life. It was December 12th, 2018. And sadly, over the last few years, a number of our colleagues have also lost family members to suicide. That loss, the catalyst for this program. We spent the better part of the year meeting everyday people, hearing their stories, their struggles with depression and mental illness. There is a stigma surrounding our mental health that needs to end. One in 5 people will experience a mental health issue at some point in their lives. And sadly, as we know, some don't survive. People often suffer in silence, terrified to let anyone know that something is wrong. We're going to have a real conversation about mental health and the sometimes devastating toll that illness takes on families. But there is help, and there's hope. You will see the Suicide Prevention Lifeline and Crisis Text Line on the screen. If you are struggling, if someone you know is hurting, reach out. Someone on the other end of the line can help. We hope this program will encourage you to open up and talk candidly about mental health with the ones you love.
I was hospitalized once as a teenager, and I think 8 or 9 times as an adult. I had been having bipolar episodes looking back. Like the first really big one that I can remember was the spring 2011. What changed was that I started having what's called rapid cycling. And the clinical definition of that is you have 4 more episodes a year. And I actually did. And they would line up pretty well with time changes and seasonal changes.
Amanda and her husband Ken have been to hell and back. Going public about their battle with mental illness was not an easy decision. They know many other families watching this are struggling in silence.
It's a difficult topic, and I just think that being as open as we can comfortably be, I have seen it in my own life make a genuine impact on the people in my life and around me.
Married 15 years with 3 children, the couple has been on a harrowing journey to save Amanda's life, find a treatment that works to manage her rapid cycling bipolar. High highs or mania that can last as long as a week, followed by deep, dark depression.
Something wasn't right, and I didn't know what it was. I was watching her just spiral into this really dark place, and I couldn't figure out how to help.
With a master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan, Amanda was working as a case manager and therapist, but her bipolar episodes were growing increasingly worse. 2014 was the turning point.
Then I crashed and I had a depression, and I went into the hospital and I got diagnosed. It took a while to get medication that would treat me properly. Over the years, I realized that when I'm manic, things are brighter, sounds are more intense, feelings, like sensations are more intense. There's just a real shift in my whole body and like how my whole body feels. After I've been manic for a few days, I tend to get overwhelmed really easily, and that's when it starts to be uncomfortable, and that's when it starts to not feel good.
I wish I could have done more. I waited till the crash. That's when we were able to get more help and get a diagnosis and start what I was hoping would be a sprint, but turned into be a marathon, and knowing
Ken
that
is Amanda's
it's gonna take a
fearless
long
advocate.
time.
His training as a police officer and EMT has helped in fighting to get her the proper treatment and care. At work as an emergency room tech, he's also advocating for others, patients he sees in the hospital emergency room who come in sometimes in a full-blown mental health crisis.
Hospital is a really tough place to go when you're having a mental health crisis. It's like a last resort when there's nothing else that you can do. And what we can do in an emergency center is we can keep you safe and we can keep you as comfortable as we can, but it's not therapeutic.
Because he understood and he could help tell staff, you know, this is what she does, this is what she's normally like, she's never like this. There were times when I was so sick that he had thought I'd had a stroke. Or that, you know, or staff thought that I might be on street drugs.
Before we had an actual diagnosis, she had a trip to an emergency department. She went by herself. We had young kids. I stayed home with the kids. And she was sick. She was in crisis. And their impression of her was she was in there as a drug seeker. And they told her, you know what, go home, have a glass of wine, and just relax.
I want to take a Benadryl.
She wasn't going as a drug seeker. She wasn't looking to get high. She was looking for help. And the kinds of bias that you get as a mental health patient seeking help are just like that. There's almost a disbelief. We see mental health patients as somehow like morally deficient.
In our culture, we expect people to get better and then just be better. But for me, it's taken time. We're going on 2 years now of recovery.
Sometimes the victory was I got out of bed and I took a shower today. One of the things that you'll see in people who are truly suffering is they have difficulty maintaining hygiene.
That can be really embarrassing, like that you just can't take care of yourself. And it's maybe the people who don't really get it, but they just accept it. And they just accept that I really am doing my best, even if all we did was move from the bed to the couch.
Not stay in the bed all day.
And not stay in the bed all day.
Open the curtains,
it's tremendous.
let the lights in.
Acceptance is key, but for me, acceptance didn't really come until after I started treatment. Because even though I understood I had bipolar, I didn't understand what that meant. Bipolar is considered a serious mental illness. It is chronic. My psychiatrist has reminded me that no matter how good I feel, at some point in the near or distant future, I will get sick again.
For Ken, there's no question the roller coaster of Amanda's illness, coupled with a high-stress job and caring for their children, has taken its toll.
I've probably aged 20 years in the last 10 years. I don't even know really how to answer how do I feel. I mean, I'm looking at what the next day is going to bring and make plans for that day. You know, I have plans for the future, what I'm going to do with school and, you know, next career and things. But for a long time, when she's in crisis, I'm in crisis.
As the couple's children have gotten older and are better able to understand their mother's illness, Amanda and Ken are sharing more information with them, details that aren't easy to hear.
I attempted suicide when I was a teenager 3 times. At the time, no one knew about the attempts. I fortunately didn't injure myself and need to go to the hospital, but the impact of having attempted 3 times has stayed with me into my adulthood. Looking back on my attempts, I knew how serious my illness could be because I had attempted before. And as a mother and as a wife with a wonderful husband, I wanted to be there for them.
Moving forward, managing Amanda's disease is the goal. But the focus is on being healthy versus what society calls normal.
He sees me through the illness, and I don't think that's something that necessarily is easy, but he always believed in me. Like, even when I was so sick, he believed that I would get better, and he believed that there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
Today, there is room for hope, for making plans.
For me, it's that my illness is much better under control than it was 2 years ago. My hope is that it continues along that path. I hope that I'm able to go back to work in some capacity in my field.
Going through recovery and then hopefully moving to the next phase is living healthily, but then the next one after that is repeat as necessary. Yeah. It's a cycle, and the hope that we have is that the next one isn't as bad as any of the ones that came before it, and the duration is less. But we start again, acceptance, treatment, fighting. Everybody fights.
Nobody quits.
When it comes to mental illness, there is no privilege. You either are suffering or not.
Next, the science behind mental illness. What's happening in our brains? When someone's depressed, brain physiology is altered, stress hormones are surging, and almost all bodily systems are affected. Our brain is an amazingly complex and intricate bioelectrical organ that experiences various rhythms and cycles. And while most people have some awareness those misfirings in your brain can affect thoughts and emotions, few understand the profound effect those misfires can have on your physical ability and well-being.
Mental illness is a brain disease. Just as someone may have cancer or diabetes, you're suffering from a disease.
This is where we are. This is where our personalities, our souls, everything kind of starts there.
330 million people around the world suffer from depression and bipolar disease. Hundreds of millions more battle a range of other forms of mental illness.
We really do believe that mental illness occurs in the limbic system of the brain and the prefrontal cortex. We think it involves neurotransmitters. The physiology and the pathophysiology of depression is enormously complex. It would be nice if we could visualize it. At some point we will. At this point, what we have with regard to imaging isn't replicable enough.
Discussion of mental health has become mainstream. Celebrities talk openly on social media about their struggles with depression, even post-traumatic stress disorder. Pop star Ariana Grande tweeted this image of what she said was a scan of her brain in crisis following a panic attack this year. The performer survived a 2017 bombing at her concert in Manchester, England, that killed 23 people and left her suffering PTSD. Can brain scans like this help doctors better determine whose mental health is most at risk?
One of the areas of most robust research in psychiatry today is imaging the brain. And we have a number of different techniques to image the brain during periods of panic or anxiety or depression. At this point in 2019, it's probably not there yet. We can't diagnose mental illness via neuroimaging, and what Ariana Grande posted is interesting but not yet ready for prime time.
Of the nearly 44 million adults in the U.S. who experience mental illness in a year, nearly 60% won't receive medical help. Half of America's kids who are suffering don't get help. Of those who die by suicide every year in this country, 90% battle depression.
People suffer terribly from depression. It is a uniquely painful condition, and unless you treat it or have it or love someone who has it, it's hard to imagine what a burdensome illness this is, what a painful illness.
The average delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment intervention is 8 to 10 years. That's a long time to suffer. Medical experts and patients agree the social stigma surrounding mental illness is a major reason so many people don't reach out for help.
A lot of people assume if you suffer from mental illness that you're crazy. I mean, literally, a lot of people believe that.
Crazy is one of those interesting words, right? Because we all use it, and it's used in many different ways. And people say, I'm going crazy. You're driving me crazy. You know, all of these things that we say, but when we stop and think about the stigma attached to a word like that and what that means, right? We may use it jokingly and colloquially, but in reality, no one actually wants to be crazy.
Well, I would like the facility to be the antithesis of depression. Healing, spiritual, scientific, educational, exciting, all at the same time, so that people would feel good, not only about the future, but about actually receiving care now.
The University of Michigan Comprehensive Depression Center is the first of its kind in this country. Founded in 2001, it's devoted to mental health wellness, leading the charge to change how depression and bipolar illnesses are understood and treated.
Are genes partly involved in this? Absolutely. Is environment involved? Absolutely. Are precipitating stresses involved? You know, that's environment, yes. And so our challenge is, how do we sort those out? We need better treatments, and that means research. The treatments haven't worked for everybody. One-size treatment will never fit all.
Dr. John Graydon is the executive director of University of Michigan's Comprehensive Depression Center. This is his life's work, fighting for early detection, more effective treatments, an end to the stigma, an end to the suffering.
I'll just say it outright, we also need support. Cancer, heart disease, etc. have money to use those centers as stepping off points for research breakthroughs. That same amount of support is not available for brain mental illnesses. It's needed. It's desperately needed.
Mental illness is the most expensive medical condition in the United States, costing $110 billion a year in lost productivity and work absences.
For every $1 spent for all of mental illness research, there are approximately $8 or $9 spent for cancer research.
We want to fund healthcare above the neck the same as healthcare below the neck.
5 years ago, Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow established the Excellence in Mental Health and Addiction Treatment Act.
Whether you're a diabetic and you take insulin to manage a sugar imbalance, or whether you take lithium to manage an imbalance in chemicals in your brain, this is all part of health care, and we should be treating it without stigma and getting people the help they need.
Senator Stabenow's legislation secured $34 million in funding to build mental health clinics in 8 states. There are 9 here in Michigan, in cities including Auburn Hills, Lansing, and Novi. They offer 24-hour-a-day crisis care, mental health screenings, counseling, and substance abuse services. The senator is now pushing to expand the legislation to include clinics in 11 more states. For Senator Stabenow, it's a lifelong mission, close to her heart. Her father was bipolar. It took more than a decade to figure out what was wrong and how to help him.
We should be saying to someone who has a brain disease or an emotional problem, this is not your fault, you can get help, and we're going to treat this like we would treat any other physical illness.
One of the myths of mental health is that people don't get better. In fact, they do get better. People get better quickly and often dramatically. And have faith. If your loved one is suffering, get them connected to a good team, a team that has therapy available and has a biological and medication approach as well.
There are answers out there if we fund them, if we had more research money, if we had better data sets, if we followed people over time. There are answers, and there are life-saving answers that we can come up with. I feel like we've made a lot of progress. Now we need to make the progress equally in coming up with really better treatments and preventions. We can do this.
Thanks for fighting the fight.
Thank you for helping in the fight. We need voices.
Fighting to stop the stigma and the suffering. Next, one young couple shares their story of addiction, mental illness, and the loss of a loved one to suicide. Earlier this year, I sat down with a Metro Detroit couple, Ryan and Louise. Ryan lost his brother to suicide. Louise battles addiction and mental illness. At the time of our interview, the couple knew that their 7-year marriage was most likely ending, but they wanted to stand together and reach out to others and share the profound impact mental illness has had on their family.
Guys, let's get one beautiful picture. Really quick. Over. Orly, come on.
To the outside world, they're like any young family. It's a busy, sometimes hectic household with 3 active little girls. But the reality of their daily lives is more than just a balancing act. Some days, they are holding on by a string.
Every day, even in our own house, we struggle with, is it real? Is it not real? Even though we live it, we know it, even though I know it, every single day, even today, this morning, I wake up and I'm like, everything's fine, it'll be great. And then something could happen that might trigger a reaction, and then it's almost like feels like all bets are off.
Ryan lost his brother Stephen to suicide in 2009. The loss propelled him to become a clinical psychologist.
It devastated me because it felt like I watched it happen in slow motion. And then I saw my family go through another layer of trauma. For my brother, he was always somebody that pushed me. When he died, I remember thinking, like, what am I going to do now? I was so consumed with proving to him I can do this, proving to him I can be successful at this.
While Ryan struggled to work through his grief, his wife Louise was spiraling.
I've actually been struggling with addiction for about 15 to 16 years, although I didn't realize I had a dependency years ago. The last 6 months of 2014, it really escalated a lot. I had a problem. I was using migraine medication many times during the day. I was hiding it. I didn't tell anyone. It was just me by myself. I felt like I needed it to function.
Addiction and the loss of a loved one to suicide is just part of this couple's story.
I realized around the time I had Orly, that's our oldest daughter, I was struggling and I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I needed something to fix me, and it was powerful.
Louise was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a serious, persistent mental health disorder with frequent, intense mood fluctuations, sometimes impulsive and self-harming behaviors. It's one of the most stigmatized mental health disorders and is frequently the result of early childhood trauma. Louise is receiving treatment. There are good days and some very dark days.
Do you like to eat lunch? Sometimes I take myself on a shame spiral. That's what we've kind of both called it, where I get these ruminating thoughts, these really negative thoughts, and one builds on the next one, and I'm just like consumed.
Orly, come here.
For Ryan and Louise, the goal each day is to maintain what they call emotional sobriety. Not long after our interview, Louise checked into an inpatient psychiatric facility for more intensive treatment.
I know that I need to do this on my own, and when I'm rational and stable, we have great conversations about how I can achieve it, and I know what I need to do. And it's hard when I'm having an irrational moment, or many moments, long moments. It's hard because in those moments I don't see it. I can't see it. I can't see a light. I can't see a pathway. I just get very dark, and it doesn't seem like there's anything I can do to get better or to make my pain go away.
I can't fix Louise. Nobody can fix somebody else. But what we can do is we can support one another, and we can embrace with one another. We can share that we're in pain with one another. And if we don't do that, then we are isolated. We're alone, we're in hiding, we're sitting in the shadows like Louise and I have been.
Doctors and patients agree treating mental illness is not yet an exact science. There is trial and error. Ryan and Louise are still working hard to maintain good health for themselves and their children. They know they can't do it alone.
Don't give up. Keep trying. I know suffering is very difficult, and when you're in that place, you feel like nothing matters and you feel just like giving up. And it's important to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
The family hug?
Ready? 1, 2.
Yeah, 3, hug it out.
Ryan and Louise did finalize their divorce, but they continue to support one another and co-parent their 3 daughters. Ryan has created Prepare You, a mental health curriculum for grades 8 through 12. 6,000 students statewide are using the curriculum, as well as schools in 7 other states. There's also an online home edition for families. We put that information and a list of many other mental health resources on our website. Mental health is a huge topic affecting millions, and these stories just scratch the surface. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow night at 6:30. It has been nearly a year since our dear friend and colleague Jessica Starr took her life. We remember one of our own. And we'll bring you the story of a little girl desperate to end her pain at just 10 years old. It's a story of healing and hope. Friday night at 6:30 right here on Fox 2. I'm Monica Gale. Thanks for watching. One in 5 people will suffer a mental illness at some point in their life. This disease does not discriminate. Tonight, a Fox 2 News special offering hope and healing.
It's really important to understand that someone could be suffering right in front of your face, and you may never know it.
"15-year-old Carly grabs a moment of backyard playtime with her dog. A simple joy this bright, accomplished teen has spent years working to reclaim. Adopted as an infant from China, Carly's family was overjoyed with their beautiful baby girl.
We brought Carly home in December of 2004. It was amazing, you know, and within a month, my sons, we asked them how they felt about their sister, and they both said separately, not knowing what the other said, that they felt like she'd always been with us, which gave me chills.
The early years were a happy whirl of activity and exciting milestones for Carly. By 4th grade, things had changed.
I felt like crap, like constantly.
It started with a bully. A note slipped to Carly in class at the private school she attended.
She was getting a little moody. I thought it was just hormones maybe, or just, you know, her age. She was very quiet when she would get in the car after school, and she would kind of snap. She came home from school one day and said that she had gotten bullied. I immediately called the school and had them dig out the note that this girl had given her, and they said they were going to take care of it. things settled down for a couple months, and I thought that it was taken care of.
But the bullying continued, and Carly, then just 10 years old, took a drastic step.
I went to the bathroom and I took her prescription medication and I just popped those.
And you thought, what's going to happen?
I don't know, I was just kind of waiting to see what would happen.
So do you feel like you wanted to die?
I think at that time I didn't really know.
A little girl's desperate cry for help. The pills she swallowed were allergy medications. Carly was rushed to the hospital. Physically, she would be okay.
You know, they asked us what we wanted to do, if we wanted to bring her home and take her to counseling, or if we wanted to put her in a facility for a couple days to get monitored, and we decided to do that because we didn't know what to do. It wasn't something that we'd ever experienced before.
After her attempted overdose and release from the hospital, Carly's depression and anxiety would continue, and she started cutting.
Mostly just self-hatred and anger at myself. Like, why did I do this? Why did I put, like, that amount of pressure on everybody else? You know? Like, I think it was just self-blaming for everything that I did. And, like, the emotions that I put on everybody else.
She apologized a lot, and I kept telling her, you don't have to apologize. You know, this is just, it's something that happens. It's not your fault. You know, it's a disease, and, you know, we're going to work through it, but we love you no matter what, and, you know, nothing is going to stop that.
It was a lot of, you know, just, is it worth it? Is it still worth it? You know, like, is there like a light at the end of the tunnel?
And so once you got on medication and you started therapy, did things start to change for you?
Not right away. It took a while for, you know, things to get a little bit better, and then it just, at one point, it just all kind of like clicked, and like things just progressively got better after that.
For Carly and her family, it has been a long road back to healing, to finding balance.
I had a bunch of people constantly tell me, like, it gets better, you know. Like, it might not feel like it right now, but it gets better. But honestly, that's probably like the best piece of advice I ever got out of everybody, was just, it does get better.
And do you feel like this journey has brought you closer to your family?
Yes, most definitely. I think my mom and I are a lot closer than we used to be.
You're gonna make me cry, and I never cry.
I'm already crying, it's fine.
Your voice was wavering a little.
When you look at your mom and you know what you've been through together, what do you want to say to her?
I love you.
I love you too. Now I am gonna cry.
Carly continues to see her therapist and take antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications. This fall, she started her sophomore year of high school. We wish her a great year ahead and continued good health.
We live in a society where men are taught to, if they express their feelings, then that's a sign of weakness. They're weak if you express your feelings. And we know that that's not true, but to a man that may be true. I'm a male, I should be able to figure out my problems and work them out on my own.
6 million men in America are diagnosed with depression each year. Those are the men who actually seek help. When we come back, learning to admit it's okay to not be okay. It was a Facebook post that caught our attention. Joe Harris, our good friend, a former Fox 2 colleague, admitting he battled depression. When it got to be too much, he got help. Joe writes, "Please don't suffer in silence, fellas." He includes a link to a Men's Health article with the headline, "Not talking about mental health is literally killing men."
I guess I never looked at it as being strong to come out and say something like that. I just felt like it needed to be said. It was one of those things that if I'm feeling this way, I can't be the only one.
Joe is not alone. Roughly 6 million men in this country are diagnosed with depression every year. An estimated 3 million suffer from daily anxiety. Death by suicide is now the 7th leading cause of death for men. The numbers are staggering. The stigma surrounding mental health crippling, preventing many men from seeking help.
We live in a society where men are taught to, if they express their feelings, then that's a sign of weakness. They're weak if you express your feelings. And we know that that's not true, but to a man that may be true. I'm a male. I should be able to figure out my problems and work them out on my own.
It kind of started when my mom got sick in September of 2017. And then my dad got sick in November of that same year, and then he went into the hospital first, and then she went to the hospital, and then he passed in February, and then she passed in April. Losing both parents in such a compact time, you're kind of sent on a, everything that was rooted in your life, they knew me the longest.
A devoted son, husband, and father to a teenage daughter, Joe worked as a Fox 2 photographer for more than a decade. Today, he heads up the TV media division for the city of Detroit, coordinating and covering high-profile events and documenting the city's comeback. The sudden loss of his parents last year was devastating. Joe continued working through the pain, going through the motions of daily life as depression set in.
Depression doesn't discriminate. Depression is one of those things that before you realize it, you're sleeping longer, or you're not calling your friends, or you're, pulling back from social media, and you're withdrawing. It's a natural tendency, at least for me, I could say it. It's a natural tendency for me to protect myself. I don't want to be the person that people feel like always needs to be checked on. You're raised to be, strong. You're raised to keep moving. So it's like, how long am I supposed to wallow in this pain? But I never felt pain like this before.
At his lowest point, at the urging of his wife, Joe finally reached out to the city's Employee Assistance Program, or EAP.
For me, I just needed to talk to somebody. I needed to get it out of my own head, and that's a place where I'm so comfortable. I will sit there and just work around my own thoughts until it makes sense to me. But sometimes you need that sounding board, and for me it's being able to hear somebody else repeat back to me, or sometimes hear it even come out of my own mouth for my own ears to hear, that makes it start to make sense. There are a lot of things that happen to a lot of good people. I'm not special in terms of going through the pain. I just have to understand my journey in terms of how I keep my place in the world. And that's what I'm still figuring out.
Joe is still processing his loss, but he's no longer suffering in silence. And he's grateful to those who were there for him when he needed it most.
People do their best to check on you. For me, I appreciate the looking in, and all of the love that people reached out to me has always gone, just straight to where I needed it to go.
When we get people better from depression, it is life-affirming. It is a significant improvement of the quality of their life.
Up next, the new drug that's giving some patients with treatment-resistant depression renewed hope and a chance to get their life back.
People suffer terribly from depression. It is a uniquely painful condition, and unless you treat it or have it or love someone who has it, it's hard to imagine what a burdensome illness this is.
There were days when I could not even pick myself up off the floor.
Roughly 16 million Americans suffer some form of major depression every year. And like Linda, 30% of them will not respond to standard oral antidepressant therapy. We don't yet know why. We do know more women than men suffer from treatment-resistant depression, or TRD.
When we get people better from depression, it is life-affirming, it is a significant improvement of the quality of their life.
Dr. Joel Young is founder and chief medical director of the Rochester Center for Behavioral Medicine. His decades-old practice has been on the forefront of clinical trials in a potentially groundbreaking new treatment for patients with severe treatment-resistant depression.
Earlier this year, the FDA approved a new antidepressant. It is called Spravato. It is unique. There really hasn't been a major development in depression medicine since the introduction of Prozac. In fact, there's evidence that some people with Spravato will respond within 24 hours. That's a breakthrough.
A controlled substance, Spravato is a derivative of the powerful, highly controlled anesthetic ketamine. Ketamine was actually developed locally at Wayne State University and the University of Michigan and is widely used in veterinary medicine.
Spravato is indicated for major depression, and it has a rapid onset of action. This is a different type of antidepressant to the extent that it is inhaled, and it has to be done in a medical setting, and individuals receiving Spravato have to be monitored for 2 hours. In the first hour or so after administration, patients can dissociate. They have an unusual response where their perceptions are a bit distorted. It's nothing to be worried about. We monitor them, and in 99% of people, it goes away within an hour or two, and they're able to leave the office.
I just struggle to get through the day.
Linda is 58. She's battled severe depression for most of her adult life. Conventional antidepressants provided little to no relief. Several times she contemplated suicide.
I think it was just the people I care about that kept me from ever following through on anything like that. Just the thought of, what it would do to them.
Linda participated in the Spravato clinical trials for 2 years.
I was at the point where, I probably would try just about anything. I hate to admit that, but I desperately wanted to feel better.
What was your reaction after the first dose?
I would say like feeling a little bit lighter, like just going and do something routine is not as much of a struggle. Like it gives you back some of your life that you've been missing.
Linda continues to receive Spravato on a weekly basis in conjunction with an oral antidepressant. The maintenance phase of Spravato varies from patient to patient.
Would you say this has been life-changing for you?
I would say it has. And I would say that right now it would be difficult for me to even live my life.
Spravato may well be life-changing for many others, but it's expensive, several $1,000s for treatment.
The introduction of Spravato is so new that insurance companies are struggling to figure out exactly where it falls. Thus far, we've been successful at working very hard to get insurance coverage. And for this to be a realistic treatment, not just a treatment for the wealthy, we have to get insurance companies on board.
Mental illness is a disease. If you don't reach out, get help, treat it, the result can be death. It's a hard truth for the Fox 2 family, and we know for many of you watching right now.
The conversation of suicide. It's a challenging one for people to have, for people to admit, and that should be the preface of your special, is to really talk about how it's okay to talk about it.
Every 13 minutes in the U.S., someone takes their life by suicide. Fox 2 meteorologist Jessica Starr's death by suicide last December was a devastating shock to her family and all of us who knew and loved her.
I'm so lost right now.
Come on, Lee, come on!
On October 11, 2018, Jessica underwent LASIK SMILE eye surgery, an elective FDA-approved procedure to improve her vision. Prior to the surgery, Jessica's family says there was no sign of depression. Jessica was a bright light who loved her family, her job, her life.
And I would say within less than 3 or 4 days, she started to indicate to me and her family that she felt something was wrong.
I'm trying to say some affirmations and some prayers, and I'm hoping I really start to see the improvement.
Following surgery, Jessica described intense chronic irritation and dry eyes, using drops every few minutes to try to get relief. She sought out numerous specialists looking for answers.
Frustrated, upset, regret, got a lot of emotions, got a lot of feelings going on. I'm really mad at myself for doing this.
Jessica's family says she began losing weight, had trouble sleeping.
I'm praying for my grandma, both my grandmas and grandparents, and they're not answering.
8 weeks after surgery, Jessica ended her life.
Right now, personally, what I'm trying to do is focus on our kids. We have a 5- and a 3-year-old that, of course, miss their mom and are grieving and trying to figure out what happened and where she's at. She was here one day and she was gone the next.
There's just something about her when you watched her.
The grieving process with its roller coaster of emotions continues, but Jessica's family wants you to know they are working to move forward, one day at a time.
Jess had an amazing spirit and an amazing connection with people. She had the ability to walk into a room and connect with people. The person you saw on TV, that was Jessica in real life.
Jim Adams knows the agony of losing a child to suicide.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of Morgan in some way.
It was 2012, Jim and his wife Katie lost their son Morgan, a college freshman. Today, in hindsight, Jim says there were signs no one picked up on.
Because it's so easy to confuse normal teen growth and development with red flags. The key is that these things are happening every day, continuously. Multiple things are happening. The sleeplessness, the irritability, the weight gain, weight loss. That's happening over more than a 2-week period, and there are multiple things happening at the same time. Those are the red flags.
One of Morgan's friends called Jim and his wife to let them know something wasn't quite right. They got Morgan to a psychiatrist who prescribed an antidepressant.
He's back to his normal self. These medications working wonders. It's great. And that following evening, he died by suicide.
In the years since his son's death, Jim has learned a great deal about depression and suicide. He now works to educate others.
If I ask the question about, are you having thoughts of suicide, that you're going to plant that seed. Well, that's not the case. The seed has already been planted at some point if somebody is at that level of crisis. Asking the question can bring an enormous amount of relief to that person because suddenly they realize someone cares.
Jim now works as communications manager at UD Jesuit High School, Morgan's alma mater. He also serves on the board of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Legislation that's already passed in California about requiring students to have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the crisis text line on the back of their ID cards. This is so simple. I work in a school. 900 boys are wearing these ID cards around their neck all day, and it's in their backpack at night. There can be joy and grief together. They can and do coexist. Being Morgan's father was the best gift that was ever given to me. And nothing can take that away from me, not even death.
Mental illnesses are real, but recovery is possible. You need to know there's always someone in your corner. You're not alone. We've put a list of places you can go, real people you can talk to for help. It's on our website right now. We thank you for watching.